Thanks very much for joining us. That's Brian Grisman speaking. I'm from a partner of ServiceNow called Edgile. We're now part of the Wipro family. It's a pleasure of mine to be here with some of my colleagues and esteemed clients. We have Nitin, Sudhanshu, and Anthony who will introduce themselves in a moment. So as we jump into our session today, we're going to talk about what year one success looks like from technology, compliance, and risk using ServiceNow's integrated risk management solutions. All of these clients here have been on that journey. We've had the fortune and the pleasure of working with them on that. But you want to hear from them about how that's been for them, lessons learned. And I'm sure many of you are thinking about where do you start and continue your journey. So hopefully you'll get a lot from this session. Before I forget, we will be here at the end of the session over there on the side to answer any questions that you have. So please come up and have a chance to meet the team here. So we have the quick safe harbor notice, as you can imagine, in case we're talking about any future roadmap statements here. I'm sure you all know what that means, so we'll move on. Again, I'm from Edgile. We were acquired by Wipro, which is really fantastic for us. Which is ironic here is that some of us have been working first with Wipro, now with Edgile, some with Edgile first, now with Wipro. We're now all part of the same team here. We're a global lead partner of ServiceNow. And my team made the decision about 3 years ago to move our entire risk and security business to go exclusively to market with ServiceNow. So we have a very deep team of specialists, both from a functional and technical perspective, who get a partner of wonderful clients. I lead that practice here at Edgile. With that, I'll have the panel introduce themselves. We'll first start with Nitin.
Yep, Nitin Chopra, VP of IT with ATN International.
I'm Sudhanshu, and I run the governance risk compliance practice at Comcast.
Hello, I'm Anthony Valentine. I'm a manager on the InfoSec GRC team at LinkedIn, and I'm primarily responsible for our governance and compliance management.
Fantastic. Thanks, gentlemen. All right, from a brief agenda perspective, we're going to talk about where did they all start. I'm sure they all started at various different points, which we're familiar with. We'll talk about outcomes. We'll talk about monitoring and automation. Do we start with automation? How do we build up to it? What are some of those prerequisites? We also are very familiar with the power of the ServiceNow platform. There's a reason we made the decision as an implementation partner to move our entire practice to focusing on ServiceNow. I think a lot of the folks here made the decision to make those investments, given the power of that platform and the integration opportunities. So we want to spend a few minutes talking about that, and then we'll get into the trends and the opportunities. All right, so first point we want to talk about, we all know that ServiceNow talks about how they make the world work. So, what was one of the reasons that ATN International made the decision to go with ServiceNow for your risk and security program?
Yeah, so good question, Brian. I think the answer is in who ATN is. As an international company, we connect people around the world, mostly in the underserved and underbuilt market. So when we were looking for a platform to uplift our GRC program, we were looking for two things. One, to be able to extend our existing IT investments, be it made in ITSM, ITOM, etc. And two, looking for a solution that's easy to use, scales across all my organizations, whether it's IT, compliance, audit, etc. And we look at ServiceNow, it checked all the boxes for us.
Fantastic. Cool.
Yeah, and I think for us, we went through a pretty extensive review and requirements and did some demos of some other products. And I think based upon the scoring of extensibility, usability, and just general kind of integration with the remainder of the environment at LinkedIn, it just made sense to go with ServiceNow.
Yeah. We know there's a variety of places to start. Sudhanshu, maybe you want to talk about, where did you guys start? Where are you going? What does that look like for Comcast?
Yeah, sure. So we, a couple years ago, we had all of our GRC processed on different platforms and spreadsheets and such. So we already had ServiceNow.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, so we had ServiceNow similar to how Nitin described with asset management stuff. So we actually started with strategy engagement. We had a number of processes like third-party security. We had our policy program. We had our policy exception program. We also had a lot of compliance work on PCI, and we were starting to look at government compliance. So we started with strategy engagement really to build out what that's all going to look like and what made sense to do where. So we actually brought in a firm. They were here, so they spent a couple of months, doing a strategy engagement for us, and it worked out. It was really good because that was actually literally the roadmap that we executed on since 2019, and we're still kind of completing our journey from there. So it's come a long way. It was done in a really nicely organized way. It's been a huge success for us.
Fantastic. Anthony, where did you guys start?
So we had an existing ITSM product, and then from that evaluation, we decided to go with IRM. We basically just kind of carved out a scope boundary for that implementation. We did go it alone, which maybe we'll get into a little bit in terms of our implementation. There's definitely some lessons learned that we have there. But yeah, starting with a small scope boundary and making sure that it's sizable enough that you can actually get to your destination and implementation in a timely fashion, I think that really helped out.
I think that's a great point, Anthony. I mean, selfishly speaking, I think we're fortunate to get to partner with a lot of great clients like yourselves. So maybe what's some of the advice that you have? Because I know you did talk about going it alone, and how has that kind of shifted, if you will, by having a partner that's done this a handful of times?
Yes, yeah. Well, I think one of the first things is you kind of don't know what you don't know, especially if you decide to go it alone. And I think that we've been fortunate to have a great partner in Edgile to give us insights, but mostly provide us with confidence to move forward faster. And I think that's one thing that our partnership has really blossomed into something really special, because we've been able to provide people that I report to me with that information to say, okay, you have the confidence to go build the entity modeling, you have confidence to go build the risk register, this is exactly how you should do it. And so I think that's one of the things. And then the other one that comes to mind is making sure that you define your scope boundary in a reasonable fashion related to kind of your timeline for implementing the tool. So I would definitely suggest don't do everything unless maybe you bring in Brian and his team to really help you out, because what we found is we tried to do too much too early, and then we had to scale that back and then resize it to make sure that we still hit our implementation date.
Dan, what about yourselves at ATN?
Yeah, our journey was about 16 weeks from the time we started. So we had our IRM and SecOps program all running on ServiceNow in 16 weeks. It took a lot of requirement gathering sessions, working with Brian's team, Edgile team, understand the lexicon that IRM comes with. It's vast. We are a medium-sized company. Didn't have to do everything like Anthony said. So we time-bounded ourselves to do just SOX compliance as it relates to IRM. In the same 16 weeks, we also implemented our SecOps and our Operations Center on SecOps using vulnerability management and incident response. So that's kind of our journey for 16 weeks.
Fantastic. Sunetra, what about the journey for you and the Comcast team? How's that been? Where's that going?
The journey's been great. We've got input a number of things on there. I think for going what Anthony was talking about, we kind of knew what our processes looked like. What we didn't know though was what things we can do with ServiceNow. So having a partner, we had Wipro help us with that, but having a partner that actually kind of understood the art of the possible was great, because there were things that we did differently. We changed processes. The one thing that we kind of as a guiding principle that we did though was that we kind of insist on no customizations until we actually have to. Unless there was a good reason to customize, we used as much out of the box as we could. And that's really helped us a lot in terms of when you want to upgrade or take advantage of new functionality. That's been one of our core principles.
That's great. I joke with a lot of my customers that the SOWs that we write actually will not allow us to do customizations. We're going to have a very difficult conversation about what that's going to look like, and those requirements get out of bounds here. So I think that's one of the ways that we partnered well with folks to say that we're going to make sure that you're set up for success long term. If I customize this day one, you won't be happy with me. You're not calling us back. We'll be starting over soon. So that's one of the ways we try to protect that as well. So we know about the power of the ServiceNow platform, and I know we're talking here about integrated risk management. When we think kind of more broadly about risk and security, there's a lot more that the platform has to offer. Anthony, you want to talk about some of the roadmap and integration items that the LinkedIn team's looking at outside of IRM?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in addition to IRM, we also have ERM that we recently implemented. And we've seen a lot of good synergies across those two applications, such that when our third-party security team does those risk assessments of those vendors, the issues and the risks integrate into our risk register. And so I think the power of that is to be able to show not only like the internal security risks that we have at the company, but also combine that with the external third-party risks that we have to give management and executives kind of that full picture of what maybe a identity and access management risk might look like in addition to the third-party tools that we use. And so that's been really powerful. We've seen a lot of interest from our engineering executive team leading in and saying, okay, show us more of what's going on, or, oh, I've never seen this before, this is really cool, and double-clicking into it to really start to engage with our information security team more. And then also we're implementing BCM currently and should be live within a few months. And I think that's going to really help out to give that business resilience picture coupled with the risk data that we have within the risk register to kind of understand how resilient, so to speak, our business is against potential disasters and that sort of thing.
Fantastic. That's great. And we're excited to be on that journey with you all. Sudhanshu, I know you guys are thinking about a lot of integration points across the platform as a long-time customer. We're having some recent conversations about some things. So,
Yeah, so we've actually looked at, we have a number of teams that do different types of assessments. So same thing on the issue side, we're trying to integrate third-party issues because we do all of our vendor risk work in ServiceNow. So we're looking at that, integrating all those issues together, and again, linking it back to policies. But the other big area for us has been privacy. We have so many, as you can imagine, we all work with a lot of vendors. We have a lot of vendors that either process our customer data or restore our customer data. So we've actually used ServiceNow to get a lot of that information around where we stand from a privacy perspective. So things like, so it's been a central part of our California privacy work that we're doing. And same thing with the new privacy regulations. So we're using it to facilitate the vendor portal side. We're using that to facilitate returning information back to consumers, interfacing with the vendor, and we're just constantly enhancing it as new regulations come out. It's been a huge role for us.
fantastic. I'm glad you brought up issues at one point as well. Oftentimes we're spending a lot of time with our clients, helping them migrate from, I'll say, legacy or point solutions onto the ServiceNow platform. One of the first places we actually start oftentimes is around issues management. So if you think about all the issues from a vendor perspective, from an audit perspective, from a SOX perspective, IT risk and compliance perspective, one way to get stakeholders all working together and chatting is about having a common issues register with remediation plans. So oftentimes there's a way to get folks off, legacy point solutions where you're tracking issues in silos, bringing them together in ServiceNow IRM solution is one of those ways that we do that. So really happy you brought up issues management, very similar to what you all are doing at Comcast. So we have a bit of a joke with the ServiceNow team where we have joint conversations together. People ask us about our implementation approach, and we actually have a slide that says reporting first, workflow last. And we know you're all here to go talk about automation and workflow, but no one wants to wake up every morning to 50 items in your inbox with automations, notifications happening. That's not a really slick user experience. What we think is really important is about reporting first. So maybe Nick, you want to spend a minute talking about ETN's approach to reporting and how we're going to bring some of that visibility?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Brian said, I think the differentiator when we picked Brian's team was the approach to have reporting first. And it's pretty fundamental to us. When we started in our first week itself, we were sitting down with all the players who play a part in the GRC journey, whether it's compliance teams, audit teams, external auditors. PwC was in the room talking about the reporting that makes the program successful. So that was step number one. We used those reports to backtrack into requirements, into what the risk register looks like, what the risk and compliance frameworks looks like. So everybody knew the end game were those reports, and that really made it successful for the program.
Anthony, you want to talk about some of the reports with the team we're using?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this has been maybe one of the most powerful things for us in terms of impact and value at the engineering executive level is as we've ingested into the risk register all of our current risks, we now have a top 10 security risk dashboard that on a quarterly basis we take to engineering executives at LinkedIn, and we talk about, okay, these risks are in the unmanaged bucket, these risks are in the managed bucket, and we've actually leveraged that to be able to have those security risk decisions be more informative and data-driven to the point where we got people that are actually working to move those to managed, and now our top 10 security risks are now all in the managed category, and that's been super powerful. That's been amazing, and our VP of our team has been really, really happy with the result of that.
Perfect. And it's exciting for us to work with clients about their reporting vision, getting some of these reports in 8, 12 weeks, getting them a dashboard they can walk into a boardroom with. We've had statements being made by board members by saying, this is the first time I understand why we're investing in these programs because we're now having a risk-based conversation. And if we can get that data from ServiceNow in a real-time way, all the more powerful for our clients. I notice I have about 5 minutes left here, and I want to give everyone a chance to kind of share some closing words, some advice, and thoughts on their roadmap. So, Sudhanshu, maybe we can start with you from the Comcast perspective, and then we can go around the horn and maybe talk about what's next on the roadmap, any other remaining advice that you want to share with the team, and then we'll hear from you.
Yeah, sure. So, for us, we're going to be focused. Kind of the last part of our journey was really more around the compliance work that we're doing in ServiceNow, so we're really focused there. Privacy, obviously, is something that we're really much focused on. And then the one thing I think we probably did later is the risk piece of it. So we're really looking at now that we have a lot of information in ServiceNow from different parts of our practices, like our assessments, third-party risk, privacy. We want to start looking at how do we get all that information together to present meaningful information about risk and really start looking more at a kind of risk-based approach to our actions. So that's what was next for us.
I can jump in next. I think there are three things on our roadmap for the rest of the year. We're looking at vendor risk management. It's not a one and done thing nowadays. We need to continuously assess our vendors, new vendors, existing vendors every 6 months or so. So looking at VRM with Ryan's team, learned a lot about RPA here today. Want to use all the issues and remediation tasks using RPA. So maybe that's next. And last, I'd say but not the least, automating our access reviews. We're working with Brian's team on that, using Clear Sky solution, which is purpose-built on ServiceNow platform. So those are the top 3 things I'd say on our roadmap.
Nice. Yeah, and I think for us, the big thing is continuous controls monitoring, our continuous assurance, and making sure that we're getting continual signal back on the ongoing effectiveness of controls, as well as scoring the inherent risk in relation to kind of automated indicators within the environment. So I think that's going to be a powerful tool where we can very precisely report on what's the ongoing effectiveness of these controls, and probably music to ears for everybody here is like find things before auditors find them and fix them. So that's really what we're leaning into for FY23 for us, is that continuous controls monitoring, leveraging ServiceNow IRM with the indicators piece.
Perfect. Well, I know we might have time for a question or two, which might be impromptu here, and I know we have a microphone here, so if there's any questions from the group, we'd love for you to raise your hand and ask the esteemed set of panelists we have up here about their experience. So any questions from the audience? Please. Put a microphone over to you.
And thank you very much for doing the panel here. One of the questions that I'm always thinking about is ROI. It's very hard to talk about human capital and reducing human capital, but when you look at success factors of all of the projects you're working on individually, how do you measure ROI and potentially run it back to actual dollar figure?
It's a great question. Anyone want to jump in, please?
I'll just say, I think around IRM, it's really about improving the posture of our compliance program and tying that back to any penalties and things that may come up from a SOX perspective. That's how really we were approaching our ROI discussions as it relates to IRM. SecOps, a lot different story. It's tied directly to the InfoSec program.
From our perspective, I think some of the processes we do are very complex. Like if I look at something like third-party security, just as an example, if we were to do it in the old way, using whether it was spreadsheets or a system that wasn't as advanced, we need a lot more people to do the work that we're doing. And there's some things you just have to. It's regulatory, right? For when you look at third-party security, there's aspects of it that are regulatory. There's other compliance that we have to do from a regulatory perspective. So without a system like this and the data that it can produce, one, you probably wouldn't get the data that you need. And secondly, you would just need a lot more people to actually do that work. So we've been actually able to scale our programs very effectively with leveraging the system and less people.
Yeah, totally. Real quick, I would say we've focused on outcome and impact. and then tying that to like established KPIs that we can then take to our VP and say this thing is working, it's of value to the organization, and then also kind of the qualitative metric of, well, now engineering executives are making decisions based upon the data that we're reporting out of this, and I think that has been really good. Just kind of existing within LinkedIn of like, okay, yeah, this thing actually works for us.
That's a great question, by the way. Any other questions from the group in the audience here? Microphone. Please, thank you.
Thank you for the great session. One question that I had is, what are some of the roadblocks that you encounter during implementation?
Roadblocks of implementation. No.
Not having Brian.
Not a pledge, I promise.
No, not a plug at all. Not a plug at all. I swear. But yeah, we've been, like I said earlier, we've been able to go further, faster, with better confidence, with having people that like know what they're doing. Not that like my team or myself didn't know what we were doing, but you don't know what you don't know during an implementation. I think that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, certainly a journey. It's with IRM. There's a lot in the platform. Pushing it too fast, maybe not the approach when it comes to IRM. One thing I'd say.
Yeah, to me, I think you need, there's a lot of functionality in the system, and the value of it, gentlemen before talk about ROI, the value of it comes from having doing a lot of things in ServiceNow. So for single functions, it's hard to justify, but so the roadblock is, to me, it's just getting everybody to buy in and kind of swim in the same direction with the system.
And I know you might not be asking me, but I'll jump in here as well. People ask me how long the implementation takes. The question for me is about how quickly can the organization consume the number of decisions that need to be made to move forward, and how many stakeholders are involved. So if we're talking only about IT risk and compliance, or only IT risk and then compliance, are we talking about audit? Are we talking about enterprise risk, operational risk? That becomes a much bigger program. Now we have more stakeholders in the room. It will take likely longer for decisions to be made. So if that is what success needs to look like, that's great, but that will take us a longer runway to get there. Or are we comfortable starting with an IT risk journey and then building and expanding with different stakeholder groups on top of that once we've made some foundational quick wins? So I think that's always the question, that how I respond back when someone asks me how long it's going to take and what are the roadblocks. We can move very quickly. We do this all day. It's how quickly can the organizations consume that change. Please, we have another question over here.
Thank you for the conversation. My question is typically when you do an implementation, right? Implementation is you make decision, move on. But what about the adoption organization-wide? And how long does it really take for you from kind of moving along, like from crawl to walk to run, and then making sure that you are running at a consistent pace?
Fantastic. Any thoughts on adoption from the program?
Yeah, it definitely requires a lot of training, ongoing training. Enough cannot be said about that part of the implementation. It's not a one and done. It's not a one training exercise after the project is done. It's an ongoing journey. We did engage with Brian after maybe about 2 months, 3 months later for a refresher. The team had, I won't say forgotten, but forgotten maybe 20%, 30%. This is core team, let alone the rest of the enterprise. It's really, really ongoing journey there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. Adoption kind of depends on where you're talking about. So to the extent your own teams are doing it, yeah, that's easy. But I think for our population that actually uses it, where the more friendly you make it, the more focused on customer experience. If you make it easy for them, they'll adopt it. But if it gets complicated, then they'll kind of go back to the way they did it before.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, Nitin, Sunatchu, Anthony, thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate everyone joining us. And please come join us over here off to the side if you have any follow-up questions. We'd love to chat with you all.